Welcome to Frankly Speaking. My name is Onkgopotse JJ Tabane. Tonight we are not live and we're hoping you're having a wonderful weekend. And to all of our workers ahead of May Day, we want to say a happy May Day to you all. Every year during this time, we take time to reflect on the state of labor in our country and therefore the state of our nation. Issues such as labor brokering, issues such as the minimum wage, conditions of work, issues of remuneration, the issues of inequality between what workers on the ground earn and what executives, and all come up for air. But indeed, the question is, are they being made a serious focus throughout the year? I mean, just last week, the implementation of the minimum wage was postponed. We're talking about a strike that is about to happen. And all of these things raise a question of whether are we in a crisis or not? Are we able to deal with issues of inequality and unemployment in a manner that is systematic, in a manner that shows a little bit of seriousness and focus? And to help me understand this, Zwelinzima Vavi, the General Secretary of SAFTU, is my guest tonight. Let's go talk frankly to him. Thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate your time always. Do you think we are in a crisis when it comes to labor issues in South Africa?
Absolutely. And regrettably, this crisis is a hidden one. It doesn't make the headlines anymore. It's an issue that affects millions of the powerless, the marginalized. They have no means to talk about what they are going through on a daily basis. So thank you very much for having me and for having SAFTU, because hopefully we can begin to engage with the extent of that crisis and how it affects ordinary people in our country.
And it doesn't start now. You have been part of the labor movement for a very long time and trying to paint this picture continually. Why is it that it seems to me that we are failing to grapple with issues that affect workers in a very focused manner? And I tell you a good example. Last year, there was a big hula-bahoo about labor brokers at some point, matches around that. Then there was a big issue about the minimum wage. In fact, at some point, there was some kind of an agreement, and in fact, this was supposed to be implemented as the 1st of April this year. Now, suddenly, we are now back there as if these conversations have been happening. What's your analysis about why there's almost inertia in terms of dealing with issues that affect workers?
Firstly, it's a class issue. The owners of production, the capital, have concerns that they keep on raising to the public. And as the concerns of societies, their concerns, but because they have the media to repeat these concerns, they end up being the concerns of society. Labor has been weakened in our country. The best time for labor was between 1994 and 2007. Post-2007, labor continued to represent lesser and lesser numbers of workers, and therefore its voice continues to decline. And there are many reasons why this have happened. In the main, I think that the COSATU became part of the status quo, which was the main labor movement, the only growing labor movement in the world, the most dynamic, the most democratic, the most militant. But post-2007, problems started to set in. And that's why you saw Marikane workers starting battles on their own. That's why you saw farm workers in Detorrents battling on their own. And that's why you saw hundreds and thousands of workers just losing interest. And as we speak, only 24% of workers in this country belong to any union. And as a result, 62% of all wages in the country. Let's tackle
just that one. Does that not show the crisis of legitimacy?
Absolutely.
In that you guys, right, you had what we can call in Afrikaans too much nethering with the ANC, and forgetting that you're actually not government but are labor unions. And I want to start there because you are the one who created that timeline. You became too close to the governing party with the hope that would turn the policy framework of government into something that would actually benefit workers, and the opposite happened.
Absolutely.
Are you taking responsibility for
we
that?
We have taken a responsibility. In fact, I have argued, and loads of comrades agree with this, that actually we should have ended the alliance between COSATU, ANC, SACP in 1996, following the adoption of a pro-business macroeconomic framework called GEAR. But we soldiered on, driven by love and loyalty. And we hoped against hope that we're going to change things around. If we change this leader, we can sort things out. No, we move from one crisis to the next crisis. As we speak, I guess everybody will now accept that that labor movement that was the biggest, with 2.2 million and aiming to grow to 4 or 5 million by 2030, is facing a serious crisis of decline. There is much rooming of new unions. AMCO was not there
even with
before 2007.
And
SAFTU was not there before 2017. And there have been, unfortunately, fragmentation. But what we hope on our side, from the SAFTU point of view, with now 30 unions already affiliated to us, and with almost 800,000 workers in our fold, we can only hope that we can convince the COSATU leadership and FEDUSA and NACTU and everybody to say the real time when worker will have a strengthened voice in this society will be when we realize the goal of one country, one federation.
That you should actually unite. But even with SAFTU's birth, you still have only under 30% of workers who are interested in being part of unions. Are there, in your view, is there hope that this 30% can increase, at least double, so that when you speak, we speak with authority, that you are speaking for the majority of workers? At the moment, you're speaking, all of you, new and old, for the minority of workers.
That's why we regard the SAFTU Congress as only the first step in a million miles journney. And it's not amen. It's a beginning of a process to unite workers, we hope.
Let's talk a little bit about that after the break, because people are wondering what's going to be different. What is the strategy that SAFTU has that COSATU didn't have to make sure that we put these things back at the top of the agenda? You are with, frankly speaking, and my guest tonight is Zwelinzima Vavi. After the break, we explore some more what needs to be done to deal with the state of labor crisis in South Africa.
If you ask this Irish master whiskey distiller why sometimes whiskey is spelled with an E and sometimes without, he'd say,
You say so good, look. It's the whole thing. They're a barking to get off in the whiskey without the E.
Yeah, didn't catch that. But if you asked us the difference, we'd tell you that every whiskey from around the world is spelled without the E, except for Irish and American whiskies.
Get a 750ml bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label whiskey for only $189.99 from Tops at Spar.
An exciting opportunity and an absolute must for those with the spirit of adventure is a Kruger Park night game drive.
The railway station itself is already a sight to behold and offers gracious colonial-style buildings and serves as the departure and arrival point for all train journeys.
I wanted to dress with my best color. Being awarded to do the Serpentine Pavilion is the highest commission in my career. And I wanted just to come and show me with my best clothes, and that is blue.
Catch Trains Travel every Sunday from 12 to 1 for all the global travel and leisure trends.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. We're not live tonight, but you can follow our show on hashtag Frankly Speaking. You can tweet us at JJ Tabane at SABC News Online. Esther Vavi, a lot of people not convinced that the birth of SAFTU is really going to take things forward. Briefly, what, in your view, are new strategies that SAFTU can deploy, right, to make sure that these issues that we have mentioned before, whether be it issues about labor brokering or the minimum wage, or even just the deepening inequality, can find new resonance, right, in the policy framework of the country, in priorities of governance in our country?
In our view, the biggest lesson we learn from the implosion of COSATU is that the trade union movement must be truly independent, not apolitical, but just refuse to be pulled by the nose, by the employers in particular, be they public or private sector. That's the biggest lesson. And I think that's what discredited COSATU amongst workers even more. And they don't realize that until today. Secondly, the unions must be truly democratic and worker controlled. And that unions must be about campaigning, must be about taking forward the struggles of workers. And that's why we're saying that we're going to have to be guided by certain ethos and principles. We want to act consistently. We must be predictable. We must be intimate with the issues that workers are raising. We must be about shop floor struggles. More unions are created to protect workers so that they don't lose their jobs, to improve their working conditions, to defend them against racism, sexism in the workplace, and against bullying by management. A union that doesn't do that in a consistent manner can never win back the trust workers should have on the trade union movement.
And you don't think it's a question of what one can call same script but different cast? In other words, is there suddenly new thinking in SAFTU? And where were those people in the last 10 years? I mean, surely SAFTU is almost a reincarnation of what you've been trying to do in COSATU.
There was a 2012 moment. Don't underestimate the impact of hundreds and thousands of workers walking away from what was the biggest trade union in the country at the time, the 2012. Don't underestimate that they went on a 5-month strike demanding a living wage of 12,500, which they regarded as only a minimum wage. That they led themselves, that they felt that the union have long sold them out was deeply in bed of management. And all of the thinking people regard that 2012 moment as the moment of renewal, that everybody have to think again. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of farm workers in Tidwarens on their own, no help, no leadership from any union, demanded that the sectoral determination must be improved from 67 rands a day to 115 rands a day. On their own, they wondered. And that's why at the end of that strike, the government was forced to increase the national minimum wage from that 67 rand to I think 104 rand or so.
But despite those moments, though, right, you've got a situation, 2012 is long ago, right?
Absolutely.
You've got a situation where there seems not to have been
exactly
action.
the point. That's exactly the point. Some of us then went to the COSATU Congress to say things have to change. Here internally, the organizational weaknesses have to be confronted. People refused, and they went for the shortcut, dismiss NUMSA, dismiss Vavi, dismiss all of those that are complaining about corruption in SATU, in SAMU, and other unions. And then the implosion happened.
Do you think the political environment post Nasrec, right, is fertile for planting a new seed about how we're going to finally focus on issues of at least inequality, at least the labor issues topping the agenda of our governance properly? Do you think that this political environment is different at all, and it can possibly assist in your agenda?
Unfortunately, the 2017 conference of the ANC, in which a multi-billionaire won and became
supported by
COSATU, whose agenda since after that has been increase the VAT, introduce a new sugar tax, increase the levels of fuel levy, increase the so-called sin taxes that are impacting more on the poor, but don't touch the corporate taxes, don't touch the personal income taxes of the multi-millionaires, the guys that rake 152 million rands a year. Don't touch them. Punish the poor for the sins committed by the leadership over.
So you're saying not good science post Nazareth?
Unfortunately, that just deepens the division, because when COSATU goes and picket against VAT in Parliament and say we also oppose to that,
when they are part of the alliance,
we're saying, but hold on, who vote for this continuation of these neoliberal programs and the status quo? And one of the biggest battles we're taking up on this May Day, for example, are what we regard as the biggest assault on the rights of workers ever seen in this democracy, at least since the days of the death of the apartheid era.
Since Nazareth, actually an escalation.
Things have escalated. COSATU have signed, FEDUSA have signed, NALTU have signed that the rights of workers that are protected and enshrined in the Constitution must be undermined through all manner of introducing of new tricks to make a strike impossible going into the future. And that simply widens the division.
I want us to
but we never will give up. Never will we give up on a dream to unite the South African workers again. One day we hope that the workers in COSATU will realize that their leaders have actually preferred the route of going to Parliament ahead of protecting the rights of workers that they are organizing.
Right. I want us after the break to talk a little bit about the minimum wage. You've managed with some representations to stop the implementation of the current 3.5 minimum wage. I want to talk about that to see whether or not there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We are on Frankly Speaking today. We're talking labor matters tonight. You can follow our show on hashtag Frankly Speaking. Although we're not live tonight, you can tweet us at JJ Tabani at SABC News Online.
This is your midday report. Good afternoon.
I will be faithful. I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Let's take a look at how African markets and currencies are performing now.
The central bankers say the success of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is just a bubble.
Breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalant that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles,
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. Tonight we are not live, but you can follow our show on hashtag Frankly Speaking. That day, Vavi, the minimum wage now, right? First of all, something agreed over months with a deadline of implementation. And now that has been stopped, what is the story there?
We made presentations, we made noise, we marched during the 21st of March. We have been into Parliament with a big contingency of workers to march against the imposition of that national minimum wage. We went to make presentation in Parliament, and we think that we're beginning to be listened to and to be heard. They have postponed the implementation date from the 1st of, away from the 1st of May. They have now referred the labor amendments back to the Department of Labor. That does not meet our demands. We want those amendments back in NEDLEC, but in a NEDLEC that is inclusive, that will include the representatives from SAFTU. And we're quite happy with that. But we want
what would make you happy? What would make you happy on a minimum wage?
On the national minimum wage, we will want to start from where things should be. This is 24 years of democracy.
Yes.
JJ. 24 years of democracy that have meant that South Africa have become the most unequal society in the world. 55% of our population lives in poverty. And that the wages have been kept low. You know that 50% of the workers today, or at least in 2014, were earning below 3,400 rands a month, 50% of the population.
There's an argument that says there's a lot of people who are already under the 3.5.
Which we regard as an indictment on the very trade union movement that is claiming that this is a victory, an indictment on our democracy
but surely
and all of
you
our
must
political
have crunched the numbers by
leaders.
now. What is a number that would make you happy on the minimum wage?
Workers went to the mountain in Marikana and had a 5-month strike demanding a minimum wage of 12,500.
Is that your starting point?
That's our starting point. The universities, the university workers were in the were in the streets throughout the past 3 years, demanding that they must be insourced and that they must be paid 10,000 rand. They've won that in lots of universities.
Have you crunched the numbers, though,
we have.
about what it would mean if all workers were to be given 12.5?
The University of Cape Town makes a publication in 2014 already to say for a worker who have 4 or 5 dependents, that worker will need 5,400 rands a month just to keep the head above the water. That's not even something that is decently giving you a decent life of standard. To us, that should be the discussion in South
because
Africa.
We know what is the number of workers currently gainfully employed, and we know what the unemployment numbers are. Have you crunched the figure in terms of what would be the total amount we would need to inject into the economy for that kind of minimum wage of 12,000 rand to be a reality?
It goes back to the reality. What is our growth model? Others believe, that's our opponents, that we must grow the cake and that there will be a trickle down to the rest of society once the cake have become big.
Your perspective?
Our perspective is that there must be growth through redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor. And that's what the RDP and the Freedom Charter and many other documents before 1994
with
say.
The little time we have, the labor brokers, there is an argument that says your fight against labor brokers may well mean you are sounding a death knell to temporary employment.
Not
With
at
the
all.
crisis that we have, shouldn't you have a system that balances full-time employment and temporary employment so that at least you can deal with the poverty levels without people waiting for a full-time job that never comes around?
There will always be a space and a need for temporal employment.
Yes.
The Labour Relations Act that was amended in April 2015-16 so says. And we are in court, by the way, around that issue. We recognize that there will always be somebody who have to
But
be
you don't want
on the
labor
contract.
brokers to be the ones responsible for that?
There is an abuse of the system currently. There are people who are being kept on temporal employment for 20, 30 years.
But why don't you just regulate that instead of getting rid of labor brokers altogether?
No, the labor brokers are the face of that. If, in fact, if we didn't have some people on the who are attaching themselves as as parasites in a relationship that should exist between the workers and employers, we will not have workers working up to 30 years as so-called permanent casuals in ShopRite checkers and so forth and so forth.
So they're incorrigible. You can't fix that system with them.
We don't agree with this notion that workers are just an entity to be traded with. We don't agree that workers must be trafficked by anybody. Workers are an important source of any country that should generate the economy and must help us grow our economy. We can't agree to these levels of exploitation. The reason why the share of wages continue to fall as part of the GDP is precisely because of the temporalization, the casualization, the labor brokering of workers, in addition to the fact that there is a wholesale introduction of precarious forms of employment, including declaring workers employers, those who are employed by UPA, and more employers are now declaring workers as the employers, and which gives them a false notion that they are employers when they are not.
I wish we had more time to explore that, but in the remaining few seconds, SAFTU, why must I believe that SAFTU is going to make a difference, in summary?
We've made a difference already. Look at we're celebrating our first year anniversary, by the way, today, 21st, 22nd of April, when we're recording this show.
Yes.
We've already returned 700 workers of PRASA that were dismissed 5 years ago. We've already ensured that the workers were dismissed for raising flags against corruption.
PRASA implemented that, by the way?
It has implemented. Yes. That's now underway. We have ensured that the workers who were dismissed by our government in the Midrand are integrated back in the Johannesburg Metro. We've scored victories of outsourcing in universities in partnership with the students.
Looks like you are busy. Your hands seems to be full.
We have our hands full. We have been very busy. We think that if we act consistently in that manner, we will continue to grow, and that we're going to begin to eat on the 76% of workers who have lost hope on unions.
I wish you well in all of that you're doing, and thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
That was Frankly Speaking, coming to you from Auckland Park here at SABC, and once again, hopefully you're having a good weekend, and to all of our workers, a happy May Day coming up. Until we talk frankly again, may God bless you.